Okay. All right, here we go. So, thank you everybody for coming. This is the first meeting of the new year, and it's the first meeting of our 12th year of doing this SIG. And the community is all about what you guys put into it. So thank you for being a part of it over the years. We have a panel discussion night. We've all been down once before, so it's kind of fun. Let me help me welcome our panelists. We have Joy Schaefer, Uriah McKee, and Sean Henning. The discussion tonight will be moderated by Jacob Stevens, who's one of our team members here at Quardev. And so I'll let you guys do a little bio and turn it over to you, Jacob.
Yeah, go ahead and tell everybody about yourselves, guys.
I'll start. I'm Joy, and I've been doing software testing for probably 20 plus years now. Most of it has not been Agile, but I have been on some Agile projects, which I really liked. I'm currently working for Quardev on assignment at Alaska Airlines, which I like a lot. It's a great company. I'm from Alaska though, so. The project I'm on is not Agile, but I'm hoping to move them in that direction.
My name is Uriah McKee. I've been in various testing roles and test-like roles for about a decade. I've been doing mobile application testing since 2008. I started out with Ubermind, and then earlier, or rather, at the beginning of last year, we were acquired by Deloitte Digital. And so now I work for Deloitte. Let's see. I think I've been very lucky in that the vast majority of my experience has actually been in Agile testing. So I haven't actually had a lot of non-Agile experience. So I guess I'm kind of the spoiled child of the crew. I'm in the middle, so I don't know what that says.
I'm Sean Henning. I have about 15 years of software testing experience. Only the last few years in Agile. As I was looking at a career change, and I began to read about Agile and hear about it, and that's one of the things that led me to Ubermind. And like Uriah, 1 year ago, well, just over a year ago now, we were acquired by Deloitte, and so now I'm working with Uriah at Deloitte Digital.
Awesome. Okay. Those are good introductions, but I don't know how well any of you guys know our three panelists, but it's just not quite there. I'm going to give just a little bit more of a primer. So I want everybody to kind of get comfortable before I start lobbing questions out there. Just general stance, just general views on Agile in a really small nutshell so we can get to the good stuff later on. And let's start with Sean.
I really like Agile and everything I've learned about it so far, and I am still relatively new to the entire process. I think the thing that I like most about it is putting people and empowering individuals to use all their knowledge, use all their intuition and smarts to get something done, and empower them to do what needs to be done and to flag issues to get software done correctly in this case. And I've been impressed on a number of times when someone has stepped up and done the right thing, not only in whatever discipline they were in, just to deliver software. And I think that's the real value of Agile, because it's not about my job is just to test this. It's about our job as a team is to build this piece of software, and we care that it actually works rather than just be focused on, well, I did my part, now what?
Okay.
So I'm a proponent of function as opposed to dysfunction. And the majority of the teams that I've been working on, at Ubermind and now at Deloitte, we're a software consultancy, so we work with large scale organizations to deliver value in the form of mobile applications. And the vast majority of the projects that have been closer on the spectrum towards the Agile ideal have been more functional and have had less dysfunction than the projects that have been closer along the spectrum towards the waterfall ideal. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but, and we'll probably get into many of those this evening, but that's what's really compelling about Agile to me is, similar to what Sean says, there's an empowering aspect to it that allows you to get beyond sort of the craft of certain types of process and certain types of artifice and get to the actual business of delivering what is actually going to be valuable and powerful and to your clients.
So as I mentioned, out of all the projects I've been on, the Agile projects I've been on have been my favorite, and partly because they were the most successful out of all the projects. We were shipped on time and maintained very, very high quality. But more than that, it was the whole team aspect of it. If you're working in a true Agile team, you very much get to know the people you're working with, and you get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. You support each other, and we just had a heck of a lot of fun, and we were successful to boot. So I'm a big proponent of Agile. I know it's not going to solve everything, but but every team I've been on since I've worked in some, very close to true Agile teams, and I'm not sure. I've never worked on a team that's doing, complete 100% Agile the way it's supposed to be done, and I'm not sure anybody could really tell you. I'm sure there's a few people that could tell you what that is, but the closer they are to Agile, the more successful they seem to be. And part of it, I think, is the empowering aspect of the team being able to make decisions that make sense for the software and for the long term for the company. So.
Fantastic. Well, I'm kind of the opposite of Uriah, actually. I'm a big proponent of dysfunction. Which is why we're going to open this up to audience participation. So this is, like Joe said, this is a little bit informal. This is not the kind of format or structure that we've normally done in this, and so we've got panel members and stuff. So I've got a number of questions here that I'm going to pitch to everybody. A lot of times when it's just like some single person with some substance and content that just, delivers this to you and then, okay, tell me what you think at the end. Encourage to, with limited extent, you guys have any questions that you guys would like to ask. We'll try to keep it on topic, and so as we go through the question, I'm going to give each of these guys a chance to do that, and then if anybody wants to raise their hand, rather than saving it for later, I think it just might make for a more enjoyable experience for everybody. So, but I've never been a moderator before, so I'm going to have to really step it up and keep everything on task. So I'll try not to step on toes, but I'm going to step on toes. Okay. You guys ready for some questions then? I like this first one, and I know that you guys have taken a peek at these before, so I'm not going to be taking catching anybody off guard. So I'm going to start with Uriah. Okay. What elements of quality are not intrinsically addressed by Agile methods, and how else do you account for them?
I'm going to say something that may be somewhat controversial, but I will say Agile addresses 0 elements of quality. Agile sort of dwells in delivering value, and if the people who are determining what is valuable and what is prioritized don't care about quality, then Agile is not going to do anything to make a quality deliverable. But Agile is a framework that allows, or at least that the Agile that we practice at Deloitte Digital, which is a modified version of Scrum, is a framework on which you can hang your schedule and approach, and is predicated by a description of what you as a team value. So you can infuse that in the project and work with the product owner, the person who's making these decisions, to ensure that quality is one of the things they value. And most of our clients, they do value quality, but I've been on projects where the client is looking at a list of what we described as blocking issues, and they say, yeah, I know it'll crash there, yeah, I know the data is malformed there and is going to cause irreparable harm and corruption to the database, but we need to hit our date, and we're going to ship it. It's acceptable. But I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but only a little bit. So my stance is Agile doesn't do anything inherently, but because it's a framework and structure that encourages collaboration, there's a lot of bias towards delivering something people are proud of. So that sort of acts as the centripetal force that brings it back to quality.
Are you looking at me out of next? So I could start out and ask the question that James Bach would ask, which is, what do you mean by elements of quality? Define that for me, please. But never mind.
Don't put the moderator on the spot.
I'm not sure that it intrinsically encourages quality, or it you know, I think I would go along with the same thing. I'm not sure that they're integrally linked. It's a framework, and you can either, but it's a framework that makes it really easy to drive to high quality. And I'll give you, my background was Agile with Scrum, which has a whole bunch of rules that you need to follow. And most of these rules are not necessarily, a lot of the rules are not necessarily exclusive to Agile with Scrum, but are basically best practices across the board. And there are things like keep your bug counts low, right? You fix bugs when you find them, you don't gather this big bug data and fix them all later. And if you do things like that, you're going to end up with a higher quality product. So I think there's a lot of things. I'm turning your question around, sorry. I think there's a lot of things within Agile processes that really do support delivering a quality product, not to be discounted the thing you mentioned, which is you get this really strong team environment and the team is very motivated to deliver a high quality product and to succeed. And so you kind of support each other in that goal. And I can't think of any specific aspect of quality that's not particularly addressed by Agile.
Okay.
So I will agree with what both panelists just said, especially with referring to Scrum and the fact that the quality aspect of Scrum is really related to when you're on a team, you probably want to deliver something that's good. Very few of us actually want to deliver bad stuff. So it's sort of inherent that you're going to help to deliver a more quality product. Now, there are things that come under the Agile rubric that do technically have quality if you read the rules, right? There's nothing in Scrum, having just been reading through the Scrum.org guidelines, there's nothing there that says quality. They imply it. They imply improvement. They never say anything about testing the quality of your product. It's sort of all implied by the process. But if you look at something like XP, which specifically dictates that you will build testing in, you'll build your test first, which for a definition of quality, your test passing is a definition of quality. Now, a more vague definition of I want to use this piece of software and I love it isn't implied by that. But in terms of the term intrinsic, you could say that certainly the XP practices do have that kind of baked in. And Lean, in terms of the idea of sort of using a scientific method to review what's gone well and what hasn't, and then try and cycle through and improve. Those two processes do have something in the process that talks about quality. But this kind of gets back to the what we're going to, I think, keep talking about throughout the evening, that Scrum, which is most of what we talk about when we use Agile, there are some people who do use Lean, is about just 3 roles and 4 formal ceremonies. It's just a process. And you can imbue that with whatever you want, or you can not take it seriously. And I would say that if you don't take it seriously, you're probably affecting quality because you're not following through on all the meetings, not following through on all the formalities, and then sort of that leads to disquality. But I couldn't bring myself to say Scrum has quality intrinsic in it. It's sort of a secondary effect of the people involved.
So the question is, how do we as the quality community provide quality to Agile? Because you're saying it's not. So how can we as, the quality community?
It's not that it's not, it's just that it's not
Defined.
it's not intrinsic to the process, it's extrinsic to the process. It's something you bring to the process.
Right.
And so now one of our colleagues at Deloitte Digital uses the term quality assistance rather than quality assurance. We're not gatekeepers or guardians of quality, but we're tasked on our projects, or we've given ourselves the task of making certain that in a very support-like role, making certain that the tools and systems and understanding and knowledge and data are available so that the rest of the team are able to implement to a degree that is understandable and measurable and that's agreeable that you're delivering quality. So part of that is asking questions that other people don't think about. So not what's the definition of success, but what's the definition of failure? Not what are the things that, asking questions like, what are your top 5 risks and concerns? So that we know how to avoid those ahead of time. What are you going to measure us by? The types of questions that a developer or a user experience designer or a project manager may not be thinking about. Identifying the gaps and minding them.
So perhaps we can include those in our stories when we write the Agile story cards.
They could be part of your definition of done.
Yeah.
They could be separate stories, although I don't particularly like that track. But there's lots of ways to formalize that. Again, using the framework. I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to let other people talk.
Well, I think the only other thing that leads to answers your direct question would be, to add on what Uriah said, would be encourage people to ask questions. I think other disciplines, especially dev or development teams, they can get focused on either, okay, you say to do this, that's fine, right? They'll accept sometimes whether it's you give them a set of wireframes or you give them a design and they're like, okay, I'll implement it. And then someone has to say, oh, wait, you're using colors that might not be appropriate for people with red-green color buttons, right? Or this UI is nice and all, but I'm left-handed, so it's really inconvenient for me. Asking those questions and encouraging other people who might have other problems or I don't want to say the word problems, but other different interactions with the world, saying, hey, you have the right to speak up. If you're left-handed, if you have trouble seeing, if the text isn't visible, don't just say, well, that's life. Ask. That's the other aspect that, as Uriah said, we're quality assistants. We want to assist everyone in asking those questions and saying, hey, that doesn't look right.
Well, I think there's a couple different aspects of Agile that, in addition to what we've already talked about, that really support the quality process. One is Agile always, there's usually a role which is representing the customer and is hopefully very close to the user and is actually working with the user and actually finding out what the user wants and what the user needs, which I see is a gap in a lot of software development. You come out with your version 1 product, the user base hates it, your version 2 product ends up looking a lot closer to what they really wanted. So having somebody in a key role that represents the user will, depending on how you define quality, but if you define quality as the user loves the product, then yes, having somebody in a key role that represents the user will help with that. Another thing I think that it comes from the empowerment aspect of a team that's empowered to make decisions on their own without management saying you'll do this first and then this first and this first, is the team gets to know their pain points and they get to know them pretty quickly. And they will make decisions like, we are going to eliminate this pain point by spending our next sprint building a mock object that will allow us to do X. And that will save actually the team typically a lot of time in the long run, but those are more strategic decisions, which often are not made by management that is outside the process and doesn't really understand the pain points and what the team really needs. And that will also drive, not necessarily quality in the product, but it will drive efficiency in the system in the long run because the team will eliminate their own pain points and become a more efficient operating team.
Yeah,
So.
I think really both of your points and Sean, your point, kind of touching on advocacy, essentially, right? You know, as a tester or in the story, you guys are sort of advocating for the user, and that ties right back into empowerment. And you guys are giving tremendous answers, and it's just dovetailing in very well to the next question. And this is my best attempt at being somewhat inflammatory, so we'll see if I can. You're right. So, okay, let me wrap up really quickly there. I caught a couple of key words here. Then. So basically, well, the concept of distinguishing from process and function in terms of implementing quality, and I think the two key words were team and empowerment. Right. Mm-hmm. So, so you touched on that. The most joy. I'm gonna start with you for this. I've got two statements here. Two statements. The team is responsible for quality. And my other statement is, each individual team member is responsible for quality. So, comparing these statements, are they the same? Are they different? Are they conflicting? What's more accurate and what is more troublesome?
I feel like I'm in school again. Compare and contrast. That's an example. I actually think they're both true, and they're not in conflict with each other. I think both the individuals and the team own the quality. If I was going to say I'm more disturbed by one of those than the other, I would put the onus on the team to own the quality, because I've been an individual contributor on a team where I've been very concerned about the quality and nobody else on the team seems to care at all, and it's a very frustrating position to be in. So I would much rather perhaps be somebody that doesn't necessarily care that much about quality myself, but be on a team that cares about quality. And in Agile, because the team, you know, you either sort of succeed or fail as a team. The team as a whole does tend to own quality. But I think each individual is responsible for making sure that they do their part. And
pluribus unum, so to
right,
speak.
right.
Okay.
So one of the interesting dysfunctions that can come from each individual owns quality is the introduction of blame into a project. And so if each individual is individually responsible for the quality that they do, so let's say it's you're at Facebook as a developer, you know, there's no QA, you're responsible for the code you produce, and the theory is that that's going to drive you to produce better code because you're not relying on the safety net. It's very libertarian philosophy in a lot of ways, which is fine. Exactly, but that means that there are plenty of times that I've seen in structures like that where someone, and it could be for any number of reasons, maybe they make a mistake because they've been working 80 hours in a week, or maybe they actually uncover an issue that someone else introduced, but it appears as if they did it, or for whatever reason, they get blamed by the team. They might get ostracized, and there could be some real dysfunction introduced into this organization that, at its best, performs well together. So I prefer, I find each individual is responsible for quality to be somewhat problematic. I'm going to contradict myself right now, though, by saying that it is important to have individuals take responsibility for their actions, though. And ideally, what will happen is if you have the team succeeding or failing together, then that will actually create a positive environment where people will feel comfortable saying, I'm not sure how to do this. I need some help. And I think to sort of go beyond the bounds of this question a little bit, to talk about the role of quality assurance or test or whatever label you want to ascribe to what I do as professionally. I'm sometimes the person that people go to for help because maybe they need some information that I'm going to collect for them. Maybe I'm the person going to them saying, I need some help doing some sort of technical implementation detail that I don't have the proficiency for. But having that team structure, that team being responsible for quality, allows for this free and open exchange of information, which again actually builds quality inherently, or works towards building quality in a more inherent fashion. If I can add a couple more weasel words in there, I will.
I think that the first thought that came to my mind when I was thinking about this was, as a team, where you are as a group versus as individuals. Usually when you first form a Scrum team, any team though, these happen, you start and everyone comes as an individual, and then hopefully over time you kind of bond and become a team. And I think that these two questions made me think of that, and think of, at the beginning, until the trust is built among the team members, the team can say we're responsible for quality, but until they trust everyone to individually point out problems, and then when they surface those problems, to have everyone say, yes, that's a problem, let's all go fix it. Let's not worry about finding out who did it or why, or get caught up in that. Oh, there's a problem, let's go fix it. I think that there is a process a team goes through where either of these statements can be more or less true, and probably through the process of actually a development cycle, whatever that is for you. So in a Scrum cycle, just a sprint, when you first started, it might be at the beginning of a sprint, as a QA person, it might be my job to start thinking about what test cases I need, if there's some automation I need to write, or just what do I need to do? Because there's nothing maybe to do immediately. There's no code written just yet, or maybe there's no, depending on where you are. And so, starting out, it's every individual building the thing they're building, or pairs if they're pairing, to build and build quality. And then as it evolves and grows, it's sort of like the team becomes responsible for it. So I think that there's an interesting duality in these two statements, that yes, for certain sets of work, when you're working on something, you are responsible for that quality, but then at some point it becomes part of this product that you as a team are developing, you are building, which then everyone sort of has responsibility for. And I think fostering that is important, because as Uriah pointed out, if you get to a state where you're worried about I missed this case for whatever reason. What's going to happen to me if I bring it up? Or a dev finds out I totally didn't code this part correctly. I'm going to have to write a story for it. That's uncomfortable. If they don't know there's support there, there's an incentive for them not to, as an individual, support quality. And so I think they're tied in that in your everyday work, you have to want quality, but then as you hand off that work to be owned by the larger team or surface the larger team, you have to have faith that, or trust in your team that they're going to agree and help you to make that more quality, increase the level of whatever. Get caught up in quality, because as soon as you say quality, I start thinking exactly what you said. What do you mean by quality? Is it the right color? So as I speak through this, I'm thinking, well, it depends on what you want to say for quality. But the overall point is, there's stuff we do that we have direct control over quality, but at some point, we can't have control over quality, right? I can test I can say I tested an entire thing, but we all know I didn't test all the cases. It's not possible, unless it's a very small piece of code. And so the whole team has to understand that, there may be edge cases that nobody ever thought of testing that might not work, and we're kind of responsible for that if they come up.
Awesome. Anyone?
I feel like I hear a lot of the conversation. I come from a smaller company. I've been working in a smaller company, and the team kind of is the company, right? The pain is ultimately, like, as you expressed, as the product grows and everybody puts their pieces in, and then it gets released. The pain is going to be felt by the company name, basically, rather than a team that is a part of a bigger organization. I wonder if there's, I don't have a question, but I'm just thinking out loud kind of about that aspect of it and how it applies. How do you become agile with individuals kind of doing their thing versus teams or pairs or somehow pieces of a larger puzzle?
The buy-in seems a little bit more organic at your
Yeah.
level, right? Whereas on a larger scale. That kind of touches on this gentleman's earlier question in my mind, actually, when you had asked about quality. It kind of becomes more a question of salesmanship, so to speak. Okay, so we've got advocacy for somebody else, but then what do we do if there are members of the team that don't feel particularly concerned with quality at the level that the rest of us might? So
There's lots of ways to approach that.
give us a couple.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I've been on teams where we've gone from a less formalized, less rigorous process to a more formalized, but more poorly understood process. When we first started adopting Scrum, that's really what happened. We had one person who went to the Scrum training for a couple days, came back and said, "All right, here's a book, read it." And then on Monday, it's Scrum, we're going to do it. All right, great. And that was kind of an interesting process. And I remember spending literally an 8-hour meeting, one meeting, 8 hours, talking about how to define a user story. That was painful. Because there were people who had been doing software development for a very long time, had been successful in the organization we were in, doing mobile application development, working with these people, and really didn't see a lot of value coming in and modifying a process that was maybe less formalized, but seemingly working for us. And what helped with eventually was trust. And so going back to the idea of the team is a core component. Because when you work with someone with the mentality of we are a team, there's an implicit trust there. There's, I trust you at least enough to know that what you do well, presumably, or at least hopefully. And so there's we eventually had an interesting implementation of Scrum in that project. It was moderately successful, but we were big enough to have a couple different project teams going on, and some were more closely adopting the Scrum model. And that actually acted as an advertisement to people not on that team. It's basically a team got together and said, and the PM said, trust me on this. We're going to try it. We're going to do our best to implement this as close as we possibly can. And they were very successful. And that success sort of radiated out from that team to our other teams. At that time, we were not that large. We were maybe a 30, 40-person company. So it didn't take long for other people to see the improvements they were making over teams that were doing what we had been doing and successful to some extent, but not nearly as successful as this other team. And so again, it sort of goes to trust, and then or rather trust but verify is one way to sort of get there. So if you can get the buy-in, just say, let's try it, I know there's lots of questions and we may fumble through, but let's try it. And then, you know, after a set amount of time, let's reevaluate where we're at. As long as people aren't overly emotional about that seems to work pretty well.
In 2 of the different Scrum teams I was on, there were people who sort of actively fought against the system and didn't, and I wouldn't go so far as to say they didn't care about quality, but it seemed like they didn't care about quality because the rest of the team was clearly bought into, yes, let's do this, and they were like, whatever, I'm doing my own thing. And in both of those cases, within 6 months, those people were gone. One of them quit and found a different job, I think, probably because he just felt like he didn't fit in, and the other one was laid off because he wasn't fitting in.
Did they view quality as sort of a specified role?
That I couldn't answer. But you have an interesting comment. Most of my career early on, I worked for startup companies that were all small, tiny startup companies. And the first time I went to work for a large company, I'd been there for a while, and they had a lot of processes that were really painful. And so I'm pushing toward best process because they're all like, the life side is melting down. Everybody's working 80 hours a week. You're getting calls on Sunday to come, you know, address this issue. You know, it was a horrible situation. And so we start fixing it. Me and this other guy knew, you know, and started putting all these processes in place so we could get to the point where we weren't melting the live site all the time. And we were actively fought against by this one guy. And I couldn't figure out why he was so against these changes we were making, because it didn't occur to me that he would want to do something. I finally figured out, at least this is my theory, was that he had been rewarded his entire career for being there on Sunday. You know, he always got kudos on his, you know, yearly annual reports for, you know, working on Christmas. Oh, the guy worked so hard, bent over backwards. He didn't want us to fix the melting down life site. He was a crisis manager. He looked good when there was a crisis. And so we were taking away his crisis, and he was a mediocre normal manager. He was best in a crisis, and he didn't like it. But it took me a long time to figure it out, and finally I'm like, oh, that's right. You know, his success, it was such a large company, his individual success was not tied to how well the company or even that team did. It was tied to how his managers perceived how hard he was working as an individual.
I think that is exactly the place where people will either overtly or not fight against a lot of the Scrum and team type practices, because you can build a mentality if you're rewarded based on a job title and a measurable product like lines of code, or whatever, bugs. There all of a sudden become these perverse incentives to maybe not do the right thing for the product. And it's not that anyone specifically put the metrics in place to make that happen, but as we all know, metrics are just numbers that go up, and at some point the meaning and the magnitude of those numbers is clouded, right? If the vice president 5 levels up sees his numbers as some sort of proof that something's going on, he's like, well, I want more improvement. Or it went from 5 to 10. Well, because I don't know if that's a big or just a small change, I worry about it. And so then these things can come back down and people realize, oh, if we do these things, other stuff happens, because there's a disassociation of metrics from what the real thing you're doing is. And often it turns out in the form of reward. And one of the challenges, I think, for Agile teams is to be rewarded as a team, and yet also to make people as individuals feel like they are getting something valuable out of the team. And I think in the past, at least the past 20 years of software, because of going public and these stock rewards, and there has been a tendency to say it's the individual on their own that makes the product happen, and we're going to reward based on what that individual does. And that's not always the case in all companies, but there is a trend and there is that perception. And so when we come into an agile environment, we say, no, you're all responsible, you all need to work together. There's a certain number of people who are like, wait a minute, you mean my bonus relies on that person over there? I don't think so. It's we live in the times we live in. We were built to the path. The history builds up to where we are, and so we have to understand the context in which we live. And then once you understand the motivation, like you said, then you can talk about someone who's dragging their feet. Well, why do you feel that? Why don't you want to participate in the daily stand-up? Why do you feel uncomfortable maybe giving feedback in your retrospective? What is it about this? And just have an honest conversation. And there are some people who will say, look, I don't like this. Especially if you've been an independent software developer, right? You've been on your own, maybe you've written your software, maybe especially with the app revolution, maybe you've had some amount of success building iOS apps and you've made some money and you feel pretty good about what you're doing. And then you're like, why do I need this team? You might choose to move on to a larger team, or maybe your app gets acquired and you get part of a bigger team. You can see that someone who's like, I had this great success on my own. Why do I need this process stuff? It's just extra work, right? I did it all great when I didn't have that. And so you can see that why people get comfortable where they are and they say, I was successful in the past based on this. I assume I'll be successful in the future. So you have to help them make that shift into a different way of thinking about the world.
I think that actually is one of the management challenges of working in Agile is that reward aspect. Software development, unless it's an individual on their own building something, but software development is a team sport. Mm-hmm. And the team, you really are successful or you fail as a team, whether you're rewarded that way or not. And I think companies would do a lot better if they could figure out how to successfully reward teams. Now, the good news is being a member of a high-functioning team is generally a reward on its own for all of the team members. It's the most fun I've ever had at work. So I'll work on that. I'd choose to work on that team over some other team, even if I didn't get rewarded specifically for the team stuff. But I think if companies really could figure out how to reward team success rather than individual success, they would do a better job of developing software products.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this other part of the equation that we haven't talked about, which is maybe it's not a person on your team, but maybe it's someone 1 or 2 or 3 levels above you, or someone on your client side who's been doing waterfall or something that's not very agile, not very responsive, very closed off, very siloed. And you're trying to convince them that you're laughing. This is a very famous joke, but you're trying to convince them to change their process. But so understanding the heart of their reluctance. So maybe it's because there's a perverse incentivization structure, or maybe it's sort of calcified fear. You've attained your position. Kind of similar to what you were describing with that manager who was only good in a crisis. That you've attained this position, and to change puts everything you hold valuable at risk. And I mean that can hold true for someone on your team or someone outside of your team. And so understanding the dynamics of that motivation is going to be pretty critical there.
Well, I think building on that, specifically one word, change. How many people, and this is most of you are QA or have some sort of test or quality assurance background, so I feel like people from test or quality assurance tend to be more either comfortable with and sometimes maniacally excited by change, different stuff, but most people aren't. How many people were upset when Office went to the ribbon? or some other family member was upset when the office went to the ribbon.
How about the fact that they don't support Excel, XS, LS, X into import into Outlook 2010?
So, but the point is that so people got trained up on a menu system. A lot of people, they bake up recipes. There are like 5 or 6 ways to actually, in Windows, close a window, but people say, oh, the only way to close a window is to click on the little red X. And you say, oh, go to File Close. And they're like, what just happened? The thing is that people, especially for things that aren't things they're motivated by or want to do, if you love gardening, you're going to want to learn how to grow a new thing, right? You're going to learn how to get the soil right to get your flowers to turn just that right color of purple or whatever you want to do. And you'll follow the steps, you'll learn new things. But that's because you care about gardening. But if you really don't care about software, it's just something, it's a problem or a thing I have to get through to get my job done, right? It's this thing in your way or thing you have to do to get your job done. You don't care about it, it's just in the way. What your reaction is, okay, I just know I need to do these things and get it done. And if you change those things, you've just upset that morning routine, right? If I went into your house and I swapped out your coffee maker so that the on was in a different place, most of you would be very upset with me, at least in the morning. And some of you would very quickly, adapt to that. Others would not. And I think change is the biggest factor there, because people get used to and learn to thrive in the environment they grow in, whether it's their business environment or their home environment. And there are fewer of us who are comfortable with unknowns and change. So that's, I think, something that we need to be aware of if we are either implementing from a traditional waterfall style software development process into an agile process, or just slowly moving to agile. Or even if we are in a very agile process and someone in a review says, there's this thing and I'd really like to change it. Like we'd like to say, and we read the books, they all say, and everybody says, votes on it and says, yeah, that'd be a great idea, let's try it and we'll review it. But we all know that if someone says, I'm tired of the sticky notes on the board, I want to do electronic, let's see how that works. Some set of people are like, I don't like that change. That seems like a lot of typing and that's extra work I don't want to deal with. So there's this general human nature there we're also fighting against.
Gee, I'm sure 3 I'm sure certainly wouldn't like that. You got it. They got to stick with the
I
stickies.
think we had a question in the
Oh,
audience.
is there one more?
There's 2 actually. But
Okay.
there was one over there a while ago that didn't.
Oh, sorry.
You kind of answered it. As I read Extreme Programming Explained and Succeeding with Agile and, Scrum.org, and you can't build trust without transparency, right? So it's sort of like the chicken and the egg problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering, how do you build trust? Like, are there techniques that you can use on a team in terms of how you reinforce people for overcoming their fear and risking the transparency of, okay, I made a mistake, or oops,
That's
I
what
did
I
another
was, so
story.
you get in a line and everybody goes like this and you say 1, 2, 3.
We actually consciously worked on at least one of the first Agile team I was on to build trust. We would do these exercises, team building exercises that have absolutely nothing to do with building software, but learning to understand and trust each other. And they were usually just little 15-minute things, and lots of times they were totally these interactive weird things that my boss would find somewhere on the internet. Doing these things, but it mainly just came over time. At first, It was very scary. Everybody has good days and bad days, days where you're productive, days where you're not so productive, and to have to get up in front of a group of your peers every morning and say, yesterday, tomorrow I'm going to do blah, 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 and then the next day get up and say, well, yesterday I only got blah done, and I didn't get blah or blah done. It's very scary, and you could see the team, a lot of people would hedge at first, but there would be some brave people that would admit, I just had a bad day yesterday, and I couldn't focus, my kid kept me up half the night, and I only got this much done, and I said I'd get this much done, and I'm sorry. But almost everybody had the same story, because everybody overestimated, especially at first, how much they were going to get done. So once a couple people were brave, then everybody else, and didn't get killed by the team going, what, then everybody else kind of followed along. And after a while, I mean, it takes a while, but after working together 6 months, it was amazing the things that people would say that they did or didn't do in meetings, how the honesty that came out, which was part of what really built that team and made us like a really cohesive group, because we would get to know each other's weaknesses too, and then people would step up and support that other person. They would fill in for them because they knew that this person had, might be weak in this area. So it was really interesting dynamics that went on.
It's also good to have if you can find someone who is either has experience as an Agile coach or Scrum Master, who knows that first couple of sprints is going to be hard, and tells them, and everybody, and is there to say, what'd you do? Okay, that's fine. What are you doing today? And doesn't make a big deal about it. In some ways, you don't want to like, great, you didn't get all your stuff done. You don't want to encourage that necessarily. On the other hand, it shouldn't be a big deal. It's just part of the status. The other thing to do is, or that's helpful if you have someone who has experience, is to say, know when to say, this is expected behavior. So we all know that, or everyone who's done some Agile, that first time, team way overestimates. And then they're really conservative, they way underestimate how much it is to get that sprint's work done. And then they kind of fluctuate. And if you have a coach who's there and say, when everybody's like, oh, we missed like half our points, and they're expecting brimstone and fire to come down, the coach says, yep, I expected that. And if the product owner's been prepared, and the sort of everybody has been clued in, like, okay, this team, they're going to make these predictions, they're going to be wrong, but it's a learning experience. If everybody's okay with that, that's actually like you said, the first person to say, I didn't get my stuff done. The first is the team says, we didn't get our stuff done, and there's not a bad consequence other than maybe they feel bad about it, which is something which you want to watch for. Because if the team isn't a little disappointed, then you know that there's a little more, they haven't really fully become invested in building that product. So having a good, some people who've done it before who know when to say, that's okay. But when to say it, I think, is the other important part.
And then, so you sort of hinted at this, you said that after about 6 months, you were much more productive. Many Scrum and XP teams don't get to a hyper-productive state until about 2 years. Now, a lot of that comes from understanding the process better, understanding what you're doing better, but also it's that trust that gets built up over time. It's because you have shared meals. It's because you have worked together and there's always been a demonstration of competency. And so you can not force that to happen, but you can give opportunities for people, everyone on the team, to demonstrate competency and demonstrate so by providing sort of a safe space, as it were, to take some risks and really shine. We do a lot of team building exercises. A lot of those involve hours that are happy. So if you have the opportunity to do that, or a team lunch, or even just taking the team, let's as a team go and get coffee. We'll step away from our work, we'll communicate with each other as humans, and maybe we'll talk about work, maybe we'll figure something else out, or maybe we'll talk about what we did over the weekend or last night, or the great chicken salad that you made for lunch. There's just ways to humanize the people you work with, and that's going to build trust in a way that is really hard to replicate in any other fashion.
So part of the team building is personal.
Yes.
And then over time, the team builds a balance in their trust bank.
Yep.
Yeah.
In each other on the project work.
And then when somebody makes a mistake, it's like, oh, yeah, okay.
We've only got
Yeah, you
time
have a balance
for,
in your trust bank, we're gonna let you live.
Yeah,
We've only
exactly.
got time for one more item. I know Rick has something, so I'm going to give it to him first, and then there will be a little bit of time where you guys will be able to engage with our fantastic speakers here.
Okay, you started off by talking about the advantages or how you can use Agile for higher quality. Where are the areas where you're going to have challenges using this process, particularly opposed to other processes, i.e. management pushing the done requirements? Your sprint ends and your testers, and where does all the pressure end up on the end of any cycle? And how do you mitigate these types of things using this
How much
process?
time do we have for this?
I know, I got panic, please. Just have a look.
For testing, I think our biggest challenge when we started doing Agile and we moved into an Agile process was getting everything to fit in the sprint. And testing in particular was the thing that fell off at the end. And it's the same thing in waterfall. It just takes longer to figure out that, oh, testing is falling off at the end. But it becomes blindingly obvious. We were doing 2-week sprints, and every 2 weeks, test wasn't done. But the nice thing about working in that Agile environment is every single it wasn't just the developers and the PMs going, test isn't done again. It's like they can see that the reason test isn't done is because the developer in mid-sprint said, I'm taking 2 days longer to get my code done, and you didn't have planned that up front. And it took us quite a while. You said that you overestimate one sprint and underestimate the next and go back and forth. We didn't do that. We overestimated every single sprint for the first 6 months. We always thought we were going to get more done than we could get done. And it took us a very long time to figure out how to bite off small enough chunks of code so that we could get all the coding, and all the planning, all the coding, and all the testing done within this 2-week period. And it took a while for the whole team to understand how much work was involved in testing. And one of the things we saw happen fairly naturally over the course of time is people started picking up each other's jobs. A lot of the more technical testers started developing things that a traditional developer would have done just to help get the development process going more up front. And a lot of developers started picking up testing tasks at the end just to make sure all the testing got done before the end of the sprint. So, but that was probably our biggest challenge, was fitting testing in to the 2-week period.
I was here, what was it, September, and gave a longer than 1 hour, because I know I was cut off before I was done, talk about how to schedule, how to schedule QA activities and testing activities and this room. So yeah, how do you fit all of that in is a big challenge, but I want to sort of focus on the idea of getting pushback on what done means and what done is. And so, especially if it's someone external to your team. So ideally, you as a team come to consensus over what it means that when a particular task is done. So you might have some global definitions for done. So maybe that means it's implemented, ready, it's been tested, and it's ready to be demonstrated. Maybe there's some documentation. But also you might have some specific things that's like that detail more specific decisions points about how do you know this is done or not. So if it's authentication, it locks out after 3 attempts might be a specific definition or acceptance criteria. So ideally you as a team come to consensus around that, and then if you have an external stakeholder pushing back and saying, well, actually, I need to introduce this kink into the process halfway through your sprint, there's structures that you can use and roles that are specifically focused on sort of shielding the team from that sort of interference. And so you can lean on the process to protect you and as you're going through. Does that sort of get to what you were?
A little bit.
Okay. We can talk more afterwards.
I don't really have a lot to add, that probably wouldn't sort of get into the talk more afterwards. I think a lot of it is, if you can think about creative ways to structure your testing, I know that, I believe earlier you said that you didn't like to separate testing from the story. And so sometimes it is appropriate to do that depending on what things you're doing. Similarly, sometimes your definition of done turns out not to be correct. Or there is some confusion about it. And in that case, as Uriah said, there are ways, sort of prescriptive ways to deal with that we can sort of go into afterwards.
We spent a long time as a team figuring out what done.
Yep.
And we spent a long time, and then we had it all written out. This is what done means, and a more global definition of done. For every single sprint, there will be, to say we're done. There will be no pry 3 bugs left open. There will be, we had it down to that level.
Well, I nominate Rick to be the next moderator of this discussion, because that was an excellent question, sir. And there really is, I agree, there's so much that I wish that I could contribute to the discussion, but there definitely is just no time that one might.
I did want to point out one thing. You were asking about ways to develop trust. There's another way, in addition to going to coffee and some of the things Uriah mentioned. We were just playing with some friends a game called Pandemic, which is a cooperative game. Basically, as a group, play against the game. And there are more and more games similar to that, which would be another way of, as a more structured exercise, because it may be stereotypical, but you go to a party with engineers and everybody stands looking at their beer. So it is, one way also is to get people a lot of what we're saying when we go out to coffee is really get people to kind of step out of their I'm doing a job role and step into I'm actually a person who has a lot of interesting facets and we should know each other as people. And it just occurred to me that the board games and things like that are another good way to do that.
I hauled my entire test team up into the mountains. We went mountain climbing, not technical climbing, just hiking up in the mountains. But there were 10 Indian guys and 1 white guy, and I don't think the Indian guys had ever been in the woods before. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I put 7 of my engineers on horseback for the first time. Yeah.
Awesome. That we definitely ended on a really rich note. I wish we could get to more, but probably for another time. But I'd like to thank our panel. For coming out. We always appreciate having an audience to talk at. And so hope to see you guys again next time. I know a lot of people love to stick around, and Joe's going to wrap this up. Something that we like to say. Zoka is open. You guys are more than welcome to continue on discussions, but we will be shutting down operations here in short order. So just give it a short warning.
I have a brief announcement. My husband works for Amazon, and he asked me to announce that they're hiring. So if you're looking for a job and you want to work at Amazon, come talk to me, and I'll put you in touch with him.
We were also hiring in both Seattle and Denver for various roles, including QA, Dev, UX, design, and
Quardev always hiring.
Yeah, so thanks guys. I thought that was really well done. We have a hat. Pardon me. We have a hat to give away tonight. Does anybody want to volunteer and be
Did you get everybody's card? Oh, wait.
Oh, wait, does anybody want a hat card? I guess so. If you haven't had a chance,
okay.
we can do that.
I don't want a hat.
there's something wrong with the hat?
You can always hawk it on eBay,
Yeah, you can.
Oh, that's true. Give it away to your team.
We usually have a Starbucks card or something. We didn't have a chance to
Trust building reward program.
And there is Regina.